Over the past several months, CM Games, the developers behind Into the Radius, have been releasing developer diaries at a regular interval about their upcoming sequel, Into the Radius 2. Now that we have not one, not two, but 10 devlogs at the time of recording, we're going to go over all of the main takeaways from each one. If you're too lazy to read, you're in the right place and I've got your back. I'm very excited for this game and there's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. They mention how ITR1 had a long and difficult journey, but it became much more refined over the years. And for ITR2, their main goals are to preserve and maintain what made the original special, upgrade its most important gameplay aspects, and deliver a quality way to enjoy this with our friends. They're already hinting at co-op right off the rip. We'll get more into this later. The story of ITR2 will be completely separate from the first game, taking place after the events of ITR1. We'll have new locations and new dangers, and these locations will be improved on a whole new level, they say, with image quality and visual consistency at the forefront. Gameplay will remain similar to ITR1 with fewer guns, but at a much higher fidelity than they were before. Our equipment will be customizable, which is great, but we don't know to what extent yet. They mention new tactical vests and backpacks, which sounds like a fantastic addition. ITR2 is meant to be a fully fledged single-player experience, but we will now have the option of up to 4-player co-op that is a separate save from the single-player game. That's basically it for the overview. Let's move on to the next one. Up next, we've got a whole devlog about the new world structure in ITR2. Just like the first game, we'll be getting separate locations linked by pathways, but these locations will now be grouped into 3 different categories: General, Satellite, and Special. General locations are massive, bigger than any location in ITR1 2.0, consisting of multiple points of interest where you'll be able to find artifacts, loot, kill, complete missions, etc. Satellite locations are smaller areas designed for unique main events with new mechanics, heavy lore, or special conditions. We'll only be able to visit these for the first time as part of a main mission, but we can go back later and it'll play similarly to a general location in terms of replayability. I'm quite excited for this. I hope that they kind of expand upon what they did in the kids' playground mission, because, that was a pretty unique mechanic, so hopefully we'll have more stuff like that. Lastly, we have special locations, which are also smaller areas with a unique role. They give the example of our base and tutorial area. This basically sounds like how ITR1 is, so nothing really new here. These locations are connected by pathways, some unlocking immediately and others over time. You can't go from the starting area to the end all in one go. Locations get more dangerous as we move farther along, and the more time we play, the more dangerous those initial few locations get. This same idea was sort of in the first game, but I think it was more mission related. Like if you had a side mission in Pervme route, but you had a ton of progress made in other maps, you could encounter higher level enemies at the mission area, whereas they didn't exist when you first started your journey through. Anyway, moving on. Jumping. This should be fun. Climbing is also being improved, and climbable zones will be more distinguishable. They say the new locations will be more prominent than in ITR1, adding more variety and diversity to these areas as a result. Early access will include 1 general, 1 satellite, and the base and tutorial locations, and they are all subject to change as improvements are made. Now on to the next one. This time we're talking about the story. CM Games states, in the sequel, we want to deliver a more detailed and complete narrative, maintaining the core design philosophy of being engaged in the world as the story gradually unfolds, and ironing out the inconsistencies and critical errors of the original. I don't want to screw this next part up, and I think they said it best, so I'm just going to read directly from the diary. The events of ITR1 took place at the turn of the century. The sequel takes place several years after the ending of the previous game, the mid-2000s. The final events of ITR1 had a significant impact on the committee. Thanks to the data gathered and prospects unlocked, it acquired greater resources and ambitions. This directly affected the explorers. In ITR2, they'll be residing in new bases designed from scratch. In addition to older equipment getting an upgrade, completely new types will be available as well. Changes will affect the majority of equipment designed by the committee. What remains the same, however, is the committee's treatment of the explorers who remain isolated in their bases, with only the radius to venture into. The main character of ITR2 is a new, nameless explorer, who will make his own path into the center of the radius. We are still not getting cutscenes that remove control from the player, and I'm honestly on board with that. The core of ITR2 story lies in the gameplay, how it affects the player, and visual narrative. This visual narrative will be reflected in the new locations and how the committee treats their volunteers. We'll be expecting a new base with upgraded equipment to showcase the new capabilities and good spirits of the committee. When working on the locations of the radius, we adhere to the concept of thematic layering. The first layer consists of landscapes and nature, determined by the geographical location of the Pachorsk anomaly, Eastern Europe, the border of one of the Baltic countries. The second layer is the man-made infrastructure corresponding to the city of Pachorsk and its environment at the time of 1987, where and when the Pachorsk anomaly appeared. The third is the radius layer, which reflects the gloomy, surreal, and deadly essence of the Pachorsk anomaly. And the final layer adds traces of the committee and its explorers, which directly depend on how inhabited a particular location is by them, and how close it is to the edge or center of the radius. All of these layers revolve around what kind of gameplay is planned for each location, and create an appropriate narrative context for it based on the lore and story. Just by this passage, it sounds like a ton of work is going to be in these new locations. You love to see it. They're going to look incredible. Early access won't include fully fledged story elements, but the visual narrative of the explorer base and first locations will be apparent. The guns. Guns will consist of 6 systems: functionality and visuals, technical systems, upgrades, attachments, cleaning, and sounds. Starting with functionality and visuals, they're going to make guns as close to their real-life counterpart as possible, with close attention to detail, new animations, and better visual quality than before. Technical systems include ballistics, recoil, gun and ammo parameters, penetration, etc. Recoil will be more complex than before to help all guns feel unique, and ammo will have a greater impact on the weapon, affecting aim, damage, recoil, durability, and more. Upgrades are going to be more complex and fall into 3 different branches: parameters, where we can decrease recoil, adjust fire rate, reliability, etc. Parts, where we can change gun stats, mechanics, and add new attachment points. They also mention swapping out furniture, which will come with stat boosts, and it gets even more in depth with a mention of changing a gun from an internal magazine to an external detachable one, like on the SKS. The last upgrade branch is color patterns, which unlock as we progress and are painted automatically. Attachments and magazines can also be painted. I'm a little disappointed that I won't be able to rattle can a gun myself, but I hope they at least put out some pretty sick looking camos. Next on the list of weapon systems is upgrades, which include optic mounting accessories like a 45-degree cant. Thank God, I refuse to use the 90-degree side mount with a red dot. It looks like an abomination that warrants jail time. Other accessories include a Picatinny rail with multiple attachment slots, which is a huge win because now we can put our optics, lamps, lights, wherever we want. Cleaning will remain relatively the same as ITR1, except with new visuals and different equipment. They're putting an emphasis on authentic weapon sounds, using the meta sound system for better quality. When early access launches, we'll be able to get our hands on 3 different guns, with a total of 16 to come by full release, and a total of 9 different calibers. And I really hope one of them is my beloved AK-101. Next up is the Anomalies. They are taking a more complex and systematic approach to anomaly design this time around, and each anomaly must follow these 4 rules: must not be overly complex or large, must not have a wide area of effect, must exist on their own, never following or chasing the player, and lastly, the main way to interact with them must be through probes. We're going to be seeing 3 types of anomalies in ITR2: global, cluster, and moving. Global anomalies are seen in wide open ranges of the world, and they can make their presence known boldly, but will punish you if you get too cocky and run into one. Cluster anomalies are groups of large and small anomalies that require a great deal of caution around, but contain the valuable artifacts you'll want to get your hands on. These anomalies are more complex and random than the other types. Moving anomalies, they say, are a new type, but I swear I remember them being in ITR1. Regardless, these moving anomalies are always in motion, whether it be from a specific route or teleportation. The teleportation idea does sound cool, we've never seen that before. We'll be seeing anomalies a lot throughout the game and in a variety of ways, sometimes isolated and sometimes grouped up in fields. In ITR2, the anomalies will be more materialistic than the prequel, which they claim will have a more lasting impression. If I don't have to hear that sheet metal shaking noise anymore, that's a massive win. I'll be happy with just that change. The pictures they show off on this devlog are quite cool, so I'll put them up now. The enemies we will face in this game are up next. Diary 6 starts off with an explanation of how CM Games views the conflict within the radius. They mention how most all other games are centered around human interaction of some sort, whether good or bad, and how that is not at all how Into the Radius is. Moving on to what we will be fighting, our enemies are divided into two categories: mimics and monsters. Mimics are humanoid creatures that, well, mimic behavior of military personnel working together, relaying information, stuff like that. There will be several types of mimics that will differ visually, fight differently, and use varying types of weapons. No more dark silhouettes. That's right, boys, nighttime combat is so hot in ITR2. Let's see the pictures. Kinda terrifying with the eyes, honestly. I do like it though. Now onto the monsters. There will once again be a large variety of monsters, and we're getting the spawn back. Monsters share the same sort of AI as the mimics do, but in a much more limited capacity, and in a unique way. It will be able to see, hear, and react to us, but respond differently than a mimic would since it doesn't have the same capabilities as a mimic. The devs even mentioned spawns waiting in ambush for us in dark corners. If you weren't scared of the game before, you may be once you get jumped by 3 of them waiting for you in a house. Moving on, there are multiple ways in which enemies can populate a region. They may appear in an area to guard, or they may appear to patrol, roaming along a specific route. In order to not get stale, the variety of monsters and their behavior in an area will change from tide to tide, and we'll see an increase in difficulty as we progress further into the game. Diary number 7 is a big one: co-op. I know I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure a lot of you are too. Upon game start, we'll be given a choice: play single player or play co-op. If we choose single player, there is no inviting another player to that game. That is a single player only save file. You and only you get to experience what's happening in that moment. But if we were to select co-op from the start, we start a save file that is open to other players. How does this work? When you start a co-op game, you become a host. There are not going to be public servers to join. As a host, you can invite the players of your choosing, which makes this a super easy thing to manage. There won't be a random person joining your game and ruining it. The host is the only one that can kick players also. Once your friend accepts your invite, they will appear with the starting equipment. They can improve their gear by working for it themselves. It's best to increase the amount of resources received when selling stuff and turning in missions to make up for the larger player count. All items within this server are not transferable. All players are equal in co-op, so anyone can take missions, complete them, buy or sell stuff, etc. Friendly fire is on by default, so don't take your buddy's shit. Co-op will be tuned and balanced for 2 players, although the maximum player count is 4. To move from location to location, all players must gather at a connecting pathway. This same method is employed for passing time by sleeping. All players must gather at the bed to sleep, so sleeping with the homies is encouraged, as it should be. When one player dies, they will respawn at their last traveled through passage. All equipment remains at the death spot by default, but there will be a very rare artifact for reviving dead teammates, which to me sounds like a great concept. I definitely like this idea. We will be getting radios to communicate over long distances, and proximity talk when in close quarters. Other than that, no other unique gameplay features between single player and co-op. In early access, we'll be able to test out 2-player gameplay, with 4-player co-op unlocked later down the road. Loot structure will be changing in ITR2, and definitely for the better. There were lots of loose items in ITR1, a lot of cabinet opening, very janky cabinet opening mind you, but that seems to be going away. Scattered loot will be reduced significantly, and crates will become the new way to loot. We'll have 3 types of crates: medical, weapon, and ammo. The developers know finding weapons in ITR1 is something we enjoyed, so they're taking it away. Aww. Yeah, this part is a little bit of a bummer, but in the first paragraph above where they mention wanting our weapon upgrades to be security level focused, they also say how mod support will exist for ITR2, so that is very based. We will still be able to find weapons in the world, but they'll likely be mediocre because these will be our common civilian guns like shotguns, pistols, and World War II era weapons. A new type of lootable guns is known as a forgotten weapons. No, not that forgotten weapons. A forgotten weapon in this case is a weapon that has been laying around the radius for so long that it has been corrupted, both visually and mechanically. If these look absolutely wild, I will be collecting them, but if their visual difference isn't very distinct, they won't be worth a whole lot. These forgotten weapons will not be available at the start of early access. A new type of loot called Ash has entered the game, and it can be found anywhere. It makes a faint sound, and when picked up, it crumbles and is absorbed into a device on our glove. This device does not hold an unlimited amount, and we must discharge the ash into a receiver at the base, where we can sell it or use it to modify artifacts. The ash collection will be available at the start of early access, but speaking of modifying artifacts, that's what Dev Diary 9 is all about. But before we get there, just 1 week after Dev Diary number 8, we got a special trailer. For the sake of time, I'm not going to take a deep dive into this trailer. I'm just going to show it to you, and you can form your own opinions, talk about it in the comments all you want, but I'm just going to play the video, and then we can talk about the next Dev Diary. For Dev Diary 9, we have a deeper look into the artifacts. It will serve 3 roles in ITR2: valuables, mission items, and player enhancement. As valuables, artifacts will be worth more to the committee this time around, and they will be more prevalent than lost documents and old equipment. Artifacts will remain as mission items just like in the first game. This time around, we'll be using them to enhance our gear and loadout, kind of like the way it's done in Stalker, except not a copycat version. Artifacts will have one positive and several negative effects, which the positive can be enhanced and the negative can be removed at a special station in the base through ash or money. Positive effects will be passive, no more holding a regen and using it without a drawback. These positive effects can be passive or permanent, and some are semi-active, such as a 10% chance of bullet ricochet off the body. The main goal of artifacts is to be an additional tool when customizing our equipment. We'll have a special 3-slot glove where the enhancement can be inserted. Also, the method of finding artifacts is changing. They will spawn inside nests, which are containers that require a specific action to open them. Our detectors react to the nest, and once the artifact inside is taken, our detectors will stop beeping. The 3 types of nests are unlockable by one of 3 ways: our bare hands, an item, either food, gunshot, flashlight, etc., or lastly, the detector itself, like in the first game. Nests will be located throughout the game and in anomaly clusters, with the most valuable being in more dangerous areas. The variety of nests will expand as we get farther along in the game, making the hunting of artifacts more diverse and interesting. When early access starts, we'll be able to see one type of nest and no enhancement artifacts, just ones we can sell, but the others will come later in early access. And now we get to Dev Diary number 10, the last one we will be covering in this video. And this one is about equipment. I've really been looking forward to this one, so let's get started. ITR2 will have a completely redesigned equipment and weight system. We'll have slots where various items can be worn, which will affect our overall encumbrance. First off, the helmet slot, which is basically the same as ITR1, and we can equip masks and helmets to this. The vest slot, which has 2 functions, item arrangement and damage resistance. There will be different variants, and all vests will be pre-made. There will be no customizing pocket slots on vests. And that kind of sucks, but with the amount of detail going into the weapons, I'll allow it. They do say there will be plenty of options, and I like that. We can improve our vest through an upgrade system, and at the start of early access we can try out 3 different variants. So it also sounds like they rope armor into a vest, so that's a pretty cool new feature. My guess is some will be more like chest rigs, and some will be like plate carriers with differing mag pouch arrangements. Backpacks will function the same way as ITR1 with no predetermined slots. And also, big win here, we'll have space to hang stuff on the outside. This is something I've been wanting. There will be a variety of backpacks, differing in appearance, external slots, and they can be upgraded through a system much like the vests and weapons. I really do like this approach to being able to upgrade everything, as opposed to just buying new shit over and over again. In early access, we'll see 4 backpack variants of 2 differing types. We'll have an offhand forearm small slot. They specifically mentioned for small items, so I wonder how small that means. I just hope I'll be able to fit a medical stim in there. Reading directly from the diary here, a build is a combination of the helmet, tactical vest, backpack, and the weapons in the player's hands. To make the choice meaningful, restrictions are necessary. In our system, this is the overall encumbrance of the character. Each item has weight. Encumbrance has 4 stages: no overload, light overload, medium overload, and heavy overload. Upon reaching each stage, movement speed decreases and hunger increases. The overall encumbrance is displayed on the character's bracelet and in detail in the new character info display. That sounds neat. I'll try to summarize it. So basically, all items not only have weight, but a load point, which is a term they say is subject to change. Vests and backpacks have weight, but also an internal capacity. We'll use backpacks as an example. They have a load point weight of 200, but an internal capacity load point weight of 1000. Load points basically combine an item's size to its real weight, so an ergonomic heavy item and a lighter weight cumbersome item could have the same load points. They're definitely taking a pretty realistic approach to this system. This next part is super important, but they are not implementing a system of slowing down our weapon manipulation based off the weapon's load weight. And I think that's a very good choice because it would feel like input lag in VR, and I would just hate that. Instead, the heaviness of our weapon must be compensated through the rest of our gear. A lightweight vest and backpack may be necessary to run around with something like an SVD with a suppressor, scope, lamb, and a red dot, heavy and long. This encumbrance system will be in the game at the very start of early access, so we'll see what it's like as soon as we get in. Also, one other really cool thing about the backpack, since it's more like a suitcase now, we get access to both sides of it. Then we're having to cram everything on one side, which will make organizing so much better for someone like me that absolutely hates a messy backpack. We have a nice preview of a chest rig style loadout as well, hosting a holster, 3 rifle mags, and a dump pouch. I'm not sure if the rifle attachment is something built into the rig, meaning there will be vests with no primary rifle slot, but that remains to be seen, and hopefully we find out soon. And that is all the information we currently have. I know it was long. I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have gone over 10 devlogs at once, and thinking back on it, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to wait until 20. But so far, this game sounds and looks incredible, and I can't wait to discover more as the new dev diaries come out. I'll start covering developer diaries after every other one from now on, so the next update to this will include diaries 11 and 12. Until then, I'll be continuing up my Into the Radius 1 playthrough. I think we're getting pretty damn close to the end of that game. If you enjoyed this video and you're looking forward to Into the Radius 2, drop a like and leave a comment below on your current thoughts on how CM Games is doing and what you might be hoping to see in the future. That's all I have for you for now. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Now get out of here.